After 35, most people believe their financial future is pretty much set in stone. But what if I told you that, even now, you're still squandering a fortune that's rightfully yours? Sounds contradictory, doesn't it? You were born rich. No, I'm not talking about an inheritance or a fat bank account. I'm talking about a treasure trove of untapped potential slumbering within you, waiting to be unleashed. And if you don't do it now, it could become the biggest regret of your life. By 35 or older, many feel they've achieved a certain level of stability. Life seems under control. Bills are paid, there's food on the table, a comfortable roof over their heads, maybe even some weekend leisure. From the outside, it looks like everything's fine. But the biggest trap is precisely that: comfort. It gives the false impression of security, when in reality, it's one of the biggest dream thieves. When you stop growing, you inevitably begin to regress, because nothing in life stands still. The law of life is clear. You're either creating or disintegrating. Often at this stage, people say, "I've achieved enough. I don't need more." But what seems like stability is, in fact, dangerous stagnation. And stagnation doesn't hurt immediately. It's like a gentle poison, acting slowly until you wake up, years later, with the feeling of having wasted the best of your life. How many men and women reach 50, 60 and realize they spent decades surviving, but never truly living? How many wake up every day to the same routine, the same job, the same worries, without realizing that autopilot has stolen their sparkle? I know what it's like. There was a time when I also believed I should settle. When I worked in the fire department, I had a steady job, a uniform, and workmates. But I earned little, lived in debt, and still convinced myself that at least there was security. I told myself, it's better to stay here. At least the paycheck arrives every month. What I didn't realize was that apparent comfort was slowly killing me. I wasn't growing, expanding, or living the potential that existed within me. I was merely surviving day after day. The truth is, comfort is treacherous because it doesn't present itself as an enemy. It seems like a trustworthy friend, but it's precisely it that sucks the ambition out of you. It's easy to get used to a mediocre job, a predictable lifestyle, a routine without significant risks. The problem is, it distances you from what you were born to be. When you don't take risks, don't stretch beyond what you already know, you condemn yourself to repeating the same results year after year until life ends. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something that truly pushed you out of your comfort zone? When was the last time you felt that thrill in your stomach from trying something new, challenging, something that could change your life? Or has it been so long that you don't even remember what that feeling is like anymore? Think about it. How many times have you postponed your dreams because you were too secure where you are? How many projects have you put off because the present seemed comfortable? And the most frightening, how many people do you know who spent their whole lives believing they were secure, but ended up trapped in debt, unhealthy, unenthusiastic, and without a legacy? I needed a shock to realize this. One day, sitting at the fire station, I realized that life would never take me where I truly wanted to go. I could remain secure, but it would be the security of a prison. And it was at that moment that I realized, either I took a risk or I would spend the rest of my life looking back with regret. Leaving was painful. Starting without guarantees was uncomfortable. But that's where everything began to change. And that's what I want to provoke you to see. Comfort may seem pleasant today, but if it prevents you from growing, from seeking new challenges, from expanding who you are and what you have, then it's the biggest trap of your life. Don't let this silent prison steal your true wealth. Because deep down, you know, something greater is waiting for you, but it will only be achieved when you have the courage to leave this false comfort zone. Many people confuse knowing with doing. Have you noticed that in many areas of your life, you know exactly what needs to be done, but you still don't do it? You know you should save money, but you spend it. You know you should take care of your health, but you postpone it. You know you should invest more in yourself, but you leave it for later. This distance between knowing and doing is what separates those who prosper from those who are trapped in endless cycles of frustration. Knowledge without action is an illusion. Recent studies show that more than 70% of people who receive a significant salary increase or win a financial prize end up back at the same debt level in less than 2 years. This proves that the problem was never a lack of money, but a lack of awareness. Money only amplifies what already exists within you. If there is disorganization, it amplifies disorganization. If there is fear, it amplifies fear. If there is clarity and purpose, it amplifies prosperity. I experienced this firsthand. When I started studying these principles, I realized that no matter how much advice I received about economics or finances, nothing would change if I didn't change my mental programming. And it was precisely this change that allowed me to go from a life of debt to a life of abundance. The difference was not just what I knew, but how I began to apply, practically and consciously, each new learning. Most people avoid facing this truth because it's uncomfortable to admit that the problem isn't the economy, the boss, or the family, but within themselves. How many times have you blamed the crisis for not having more money? How many times have you told yourself that if you were lucky, things would be different? And how many times have you ignored that little voice that said you could be at another level if you really decided to change? Imagine how many valuable ideas you've already discarded because your mind has been trained to doubt. Perhaps a business that could have transformed your life, a career opportunity you missed, or even a talent you never explored. It's as if there's an invisible barrier between you and the future you desire. And this barrier is not the world out there, it's the way you think inside. True education is breaking down that barrier. It's reprogramming your thinking so that instead of asking yourself, "Can I do it?" you start asking yourself, "How can I do it?" This simple shift in perspective opens doors that once seemed locked. And when you start applying this, you realize you don't have to wait years to see results. Small, consistent actions, guided by a new mental pattern, completely transform the course of your life. So, if until now you believed that studying or accumulating knowledge would be enough, it's time to question that. Ask yourself, if knowledge were sufficient, why are so many intelligent people trapped in jobs they don't love, relationships that don't satisfy, and bills that never balance? What's missing is not more information, but the courage to think differently and act according to that new thinking. Because in the end, what changes your life is not what you know, but what you decide to do with what you know. Your fears will come. What if I fail? Then also write down what you will do if you fail. Adjust the plan. Don't let the plan paralyze you. But what if people laugh at me? And if they laugh, great. Laughter is noise. Results are absolute silence in your pocket. I was ridiculed. I continued, what do you think weighs more when you look back? The opinions of others for a few minutes, or the whole life you built because of one decision? Common practical applications. For the salaried person who wants a raise, write down the amount you want, the date, the 3 measurable results, project delivered, performance goals, proposal to the boss, and schedule daily small tasks in your calendar that demonstrate your progress. For those who want to start a business, write down the target revenue for 12 months, a 90-day plan with weekly milestones, and a routine of contacting clients, prospects twice a day. For those who want to save for a house, write down the amount of the initial investment, set up automatic transfers, and a specific cut in expenses that you will make. In all cases, specific goal plus deadline plus daily action, task transformation, a detail that almost nobody does. Record results. Every night, write down on a line what was done towards the goal. This creates internal evidence of progress and fuels persistence, the same persistence that separates great achievers from life spectators. Persistence is not mythical willpower, it's measurable habit. Now a challenge. For 30 days, write down a financial or career goal that truly matters. Make the card, define 3 daily microactions, and choose a person to whom you will send, every Friday, your single line of accountability. This week, XYZ. Don't negotiate with yourself. If in 30 days you don't notice a real movement, at least a new opportunity, an open contact or a small improvement in income, review the plan and continue. Most people give up before the first month. Will you? The written decision doesn't promise luck. It promises consistency. By writing, you align your subconscious, your attention, and your behavior to the same target. Ask yourself now, what at 35 are you accepting as enough when, in fact, it could just be the beginning? Take a card, write, read. Take the first small action today. Throughout your life, you've heard seemingly harmless phrases that have acted as invisible chains, holding back your potential. Money doesn't buy happiness. Poor people stay poor. He who hesitates is lost. These phrases, repeated countless times by parents, teachers, friends, and society, became ingrained truths within you. And when you try to push beyond your limitations, that inner voice whispers, "You can't, it's not for you, don't risk it." This is the silent enemy called conditioning. It doesn't shout, push, or confront. It whispers. And that's precisely why it destroys more dreams than any economic crisis. I've witnessed this countless times. A mother brought her 11-year-old son to my seminar because he'd been diagnosed with learning disabilities. This label weighed on him like a sentence, a boy who believed he was a failure before he'd even begun to live. He carried the conviction of his own inadequacy, a belief manifested in every low grade, every downcast gaze, every time he gave up trying. But when he began hearing that there was nothing wrong with him, that it was merely a misjudgment, and that he could be anything he believed he could be, something within him shifted. He learned to set goals, to believe in himself, and soon he shed the label of problem student to become an honor student, the editor of the school newspaper, and even gained a scholarship to university. What changed wasn't the boy's brain, but his self-image. Now, consider yourself. How many times have you refrained from applying for a better job because you believed you lacked sufficient qualifications? How many times have you refused an opportunity thinking, "This isn't for people like me"? How many times have you started something with enthusiasm only to abandon it later because that inner voice said it was pointless to continue? It wasn't a lack of ability, it was conditioning. And the most curious thing is that this imprisonment is created in childhood, yet remains active even at 35, 40, 50 years of age. Have you noticed how many people seem to live the same life, repeating the same problems, just in different phases? They marry, they divorce, but the pattern of frustration continues. They change jobs, but the dissatisfaction remains. They get a raise, but they remain in debt. It's no coincidence. These are old mental programs, repeating the same results, because the mind doesn't distinguish between a true command and a learned one. This is where the power of awareness comes in. When you identify that limiting voice not as your essence, but merely an echo of what was programmed into you, the chance to change opens up. And changing means installing new beliefs, new habits, new thoughts. It's like updating your mind's operating system. If you continue operating with the same old software, you'll repeat the same mistakes even in a new world. Today, science proves that negative beliefs can directly affect not only your performance, but even your health. Studies show that people who cultivate limiting and pessimistic thoughts exhibit higher levels of stress, anxiety, and even a greater predisposition to illness. Now compare that to people who believe in possibilities, who nourish their minds with confidence. They not only achieve more results, but they live healthier and happier lives. This is not a coincidence. It's a direct effect of mental conditioning. I know what you might be thinking, but how do I break something that's been repeated for decades? The answer is simple, but it requires discipline. First, acknowledge each time the voice of conditioning appears. Write down when it says it's impossible or it's not for you. Second, immediately replace that phrase with a conscious affirmation, even if it seems like a lie at first, such as, I can, I deserve to prosper, or I am capable of learning. It's the repetition of this new language that creates new connections. Third, surround yourself with environments and people who reinforce the new pattern, because if you remain in groups that think small, your progress will be sabotaged before it blossoms. The greatest prison doesn't have bars, it has beliefs. And the greatest liberation doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. You may carry years of negative phrases with you, but a new decision, a new conditioning, is enough to completely change the direction of your life. Just like that boy, you too can look in the mirror and see not what they said you were, but what you truly are. Someone born rich in potential, capable of breaking any label and creating a future that reflects what has always existed within you. When I delved into the study of great lives, I realized something both obvious and devastating at the same time. Talent and opportunity appear everywhere. But what separates those who succeed from those who only dream is a single practical quality: persistence. I read about Edison, Ford, Rockefeller, and so many others, and what struck me was that they didn't have a magic secret beyond taking an idea and not letting go of it until they saw it manifest. Persistence is like the carbon in steel. It gives structure to what without it would be mere intention. Persistence isn't suffering in silence or blindly insisting. Persistence is methodical habit, small actions repeated until the environment begins to conspire in your favor. Scientists today call this grit, perseverance and passion for long-term goals, and show that this quality explains a significant part of success, beyond raw talent or IQ. It's not mysticism, it's behavioral science applied to real life. What transforms persistence into concrete results are three practical things: clarity, knowing exactly what you want; system, having daily steps to move the needle; and accountability, someone or something that pushes you to continue. Studies show that writing down goals and being accountable greatly increases the chances of achievement. Transforming vague desire into a recorded commitment changes the chemistry of your day-to-day life and creates evidence of progress that fuels persistence. Let me be frank, many of you say, I tried, but what I limited was the duration and quality of the trying. Most give up before reaching the point where resistance yields and a new reality begins to form. Research on goal setting indicates that only a small fraction of people maintain commitments to change without a plan and support. That's why writing, measuring, and being accountable isn't bureaucracy. It's the infrastructure of persistence. I can tell you something that happened to me that illustrates this perfectly. For years, I attended seminars, bought books, took notes, returned and applied little, and then gave up when the going got tough. Even so, I maintained a routine. Learn, apply repeatedly, return to learn again. There was a goal that I wrote down and followed for years. I put myself in seminars, followed the process, even when nothing seemed to be happening. One day, after years of silent persistence, I received a call asking me to lead a program. It seemed crazy. I had no formal credentials. I felt panic, but the only reason I was ready was because I hadn't abandoned the process, even when it seemed useless. Fear came, persistence won, and that changed the course of my life. I experienced this firsthand. When I decided to open a cleaning company, I had no formal education, management experience, or initial capital. All I had was a decision and a willingness to work with quality. In less than a year, that small company was grossing over $100,000. This didn't happen because I was lucky or because the economy was in my favor. It happened because I changed the way I viewed money. I stopped seeing it as something distant and unattainable, and I began to treat it as an energy that would respond to my clarity of purpose and my consistent actions. Now, think about yourself. How many times has money dictated your decisions? How many times have you wanted to take a trip, invest in a course, start a business, but the first thing that came out of your mouth was, "I don't have the money for that"? Do you realize how this automatic response already determines the course of your life? Instead of asking, "How can I make it happen?" you accept the sentence that it's not possible and close the door before you even try to open it. This is how money ceases to be your servant and becomes your master. Modern science shows that our relationship with money directly affects our emotional well-being. Studies prove that people in debt report higher levels of anxiety, depression, and even physical problems, such as insomnia and chronic pain. Individuals who feel they have control over their finances report higher levels of life satisfaction, not just because they have more money, but because they regain a sense of freedom. This reinforces the truth I discovered in practice. Money doesn't buy happiness, but a lack of awareness about it buys suffering. Change begins when you decide to reverse the roles. Instead of working for money, make money work for you. This doesn't require complex formulas, but a mental and emotional re-education. Clearly define where the money is going before it even arrives. Make it a habit to set aside a portion for investments, a portion for personal growth, and a portion for experiences that bring joy. When you start giving orders to money, it behaves like an obedient servant and begins to multiply. I know you might think, but I earn so little, how am I going to set aside anything if I can barely pay the bills? That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps scarcity alive. When I started setting aside even a small percentage of my earnings, despite being in debt, I realized that simply prioritizing it shifted my perspective. I told myself in the universe, I control the money. It doesn't control me. And gradually, opportunities began to emerge. It wasn't magic, it was clarity in action. Money isn't meant to be worshipped, but neither is it meant to be feared. It's merely a tool, a servant. And like any servant, it needs leadership. If you don't take the reins, it will be driven by fear, scarcity, and the outdated programming you've carried since childhood. But if you decide today to take command, you'll see it's always been ready to obey. The big question is, are you willing to give your money new orders in your life? Are you ready to stop working as a slave and start commanding as a master? Because ultimately, money decides nothing. It simply follows the direction you choose. If there's one key takeaway here, it's this. You were born potentially wealthy, but over the years, you've been conditioned to forget it. Everything changes the moment you decide to take charge of your mind, your habits, and your relationship with money. It's not about how much you have now, it's about how much you believe you can create from this moment forward. And if you want to continue this journey, the next video is already appearing on the screen. In it, you'll climb another rung on this ladder of wisdom, and each step you take will make you at least 1% better than you are now. Thank you for being with me this far, and I'll see you in the next video.